Hello, and welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a program presented by the ARI Podcasting Network and hosted by George Koperna. What is STEAM? STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics. During each episode, we will take a few minutes to sit down with professionals in different STEAM-related fields to give them an opportunity to share their story and give their perspectives with the goal of promoting career awareness to potentially interested students, young professionals, and of course, anyone else who shares a fascination with these areas of study. And now, please join us as we tap into the STEAM of Consciousness.
Welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a production of the ARI Podcasting Network. Today, we're really pleased to have Mr. Steve Diggs. He's a research data specialist with the University of California, Office of the President, and the California Digital Library. Steve, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Steve, tell us a little bit about that. That's a big title and a big place. What's your day-to-day look like?
Well, my day-to-day has half of it comes from my background. I spent 30 years at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I was a field data specialist, and I both built and deployed instrumentation for meteorology and oceanography. And in the process of doing that, I got better with data and ended up being almost my whole career, even though at heart, I still like designing circuits and getting dirt under my fingernails and being out in the field. But given that background, I relate to the people who are still doing that type of work, regardless of the field they're in. So when I was recruited by the Office of the President, which oversees the entire University of California, not oversees, but coordinates between the campuses, I was eager to take on that role within a place that I've long admired called the California Digital Library. And it's not a library in the classic sense that you would think. Think of a library conceptually as an entity that organizes information. In my case, I specialize in climate data, so things that measure the ocean and the water and any kind of terrestrial connection there may be. And we make things, let me back that up. We get involved in initiatives that connect good concepts to implementation. So persistent identifiers and data management plans, long-term digital preservation, those types of things. And it could be from fields as diverse as statistics, digital humanities, astrobiology, or oceanography. The California, being one of the largest university systems in the world, has this diverse research portfolio. And all those data need to be published. So I'm also the program manager or the product manager for digital and data publishing, meaning that information is handled in a way that it gets to the people who need that information.
Impressive, to say the least. And I think sounds like the job of 10 men. So my hat's off to you. But you mentioned a bunch of key words that I wanted. You talked a lot about digital information. You talked about data and managing data. And what kind of background do you have to have this as your fit?
So I went to both the UCSD and community college simultaneously. My community college work was in electronics, which is my first love. And I got a degree in what would now be called applied math, but at the time it had to do with the study of decision science and quantitative economics. So I got better and better at math, but I was also pretty firmly grounded in how you put together an instrument that measures things. What's the digital response? What are analog and digital circuits? How do they talk to other machines? And how do you get that information that may be measuring some part of the world as information for human beings?
Really interesting, because I think, a lot of the job specifications and degree specifications that we have today, I could have easily pegged you for an electrical engineer or a computer engineer or right? I mean, a lot of the kids today are the degree pathway is slightly different. And so many people, when they were younger and had those interests in instrumentation and had interest in science and math, said, well, I want to be an engineer, or I want to be a insert that technical field. When you were in, whether it's high school or whatever, what was your inciting incident? When did you know that I want to do mathematics, or I'm leaning towards going to college to do A, B, or C?
I think about it like things that you would use, say, in a in a lab to build an instrument. There's a socket set, there's a soldering iron, and an oscilloscope. I'm not necessarily interested in those things. I'm not really interested in becoming the expert on socket sets, but I'm interested in gaining the expertise to use that socket set to tighten a nut on something that I'm trying to build. In the same sense, a differential calculus, even higher order math, becomes a tool as means to an end. So if I need to calculate the area under a curve in multiple dimensions, I'm going to need to use calculus. So I need to be good at that. But it's not just the study of mathematics, it's the study of applied math to get a job done. Of course, you can do anything arithmetically, it just takes longer, right? So if you want to do things in an efficient fashion, you probably need an oscilloscope to, connect to a circuit to see what the sine wave looks like, as opposed to just doing a bunch of experiments with just the device to figure out after, years of using it how it operates. So I'm interested in doing things faster and more efficient, and that gave me a window into engineering and math, um, as that socket set and soldering iron.
And I find this really interesting because, when I was middle of my high school terms, I had a propensity for mathematics, but I don't think I quite appreciated what you could do with a mathematics degree. I immediately said, well, I must be an engineer, or I must be this. And I followed that train of thought. And did you have that foresight? Did you have some guidance that said, oh no, I can do this, and this is how I might be able to use it? Or did that take some um, examinations and once you achieved at college to kind of work through that process?
It's interesting that you bring this up. A friend of mine, my college roommate, and I were just talking recently, after 40 years of looking backwards and saying, did we have the foresight? Were there indications? We were basically trying to survive our undergraduate experience. And, you get slotted into things without there being a previous generation of engineers and scientists and doctors necessarily to tell you. My neighborhood had a lot of professionals, but they were mostly, like my mom is a teacher. My dad was a probation officer and a social worker. And so going into engineering and mathematics, there weren't a lot of mentors. Um, so you read the brochure at the university, and then you go there, and of course, it ends up being something a little bit different than what you thought, depending on the school you went to, and you survive that. And I think that it's an important thing to learn how to survive on your own, to know that you have the intellect to learn things and rely on that. I think it's very important. And not everybody can say that, even if they do have the intellectual capacity, they don't know it. And so lately I've been teaching data skills, both for early career scientists and for undergraduates, just teaching them that they innately have the know-how to solve some of the problems they're confronted with. And I try to help them learn the tools just like I did, but a little faster, so that they can solve the problems that they may be confronted with. So I didn't have an early indication in high school, but I do tell people, they said, why did you go into science support as opposed to being a scientist? I really can't tell you that, but I was always interested in telescopes, but I was always far more interested in fixing the optics than looking through it.
Really interesting. And with this propensity, when you were working through your university experience, did with these interests, was there ever a choice laid before you? Did you have an opportunity to advance your degree set? Was that of interest? Or did you say, I survived, I have a job offer, and I'm ready to go out and see if I can apply this? What was your thought process like?
I was always looking, uh, kind of like a farm league sports player. I was always looking to get out early, and get to it. And I had an opportunity, just by proximity. There were jobs that were better paying, and there were jobs, in the food hall and, cleaning up the campus. And I had a set of skills, and a preference that when there was a job to do some coding at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, I applied for it. I got the job, and that was where I really completed my education. I finished my degree, but it was really on the job. I started learning about a new field that required a different set of mechanical skills, a different set of, math, some mastery in different areas of math that I didn't get formally, or I got in the normal way in a class of 300 or 400 people. I got through the exercises, but I got to learn how to apply it in this job, and there weren't any rules. So this was my first real set of mentors, were the technicians and engineers that hired me, and they, taught me how not to electrocute myself, when working on a ship. Um, taught me how to the physics of a hydraulic press, and broke it down mathematically and practically. And those are things that I would get eagerly get out of bed every morning to go down there and learn these things. And that's why I had such a long career there, because there were just plenty of opportunities to just keep building on that and then work with the next generation of people who needed to learn the same thing.
And I've had the good fortune of visiting Scripps, and I call it the second most beautiful place on the planet to work. So first is somewhere up the coast on Malibu, but that's north, a Southern California kid that grew up not too far north of there. Um, you were at Scripps for a long time, and
Yes.
so um, you were able to apply that, but I'm sure you didn't just do that. You began to take on new tasks and new challenges. And how were you able to adapt those skill sets as you move through? Were there, continued training, or was it more, as you said, still on the job training with mentors? How important was that to your career growth?
When I wanted to know, one of the things about working in any university system, and now that I work for the University of California, the Office of the President, I have affiliation with all the campuses, which is great. And I see the similarity. What I had, um, as a staff person, was access to the academics. So when I needed to learn something about data analysis for, um, fluid flows, I would go audit the class along with the people that I was working with and sit there and learn. But I had the advantage of having the professor not only as an instructor, but also as a colleague. So I would stick around after class, or we were in the same building and we'd work through the math problems. And I really got a, almost an advanced degree in many, many other things, from marine biology, to physical oceanography, just hanging out, auditing classes, and then being on, federally sponsored projects where I had to use that information. I would say the other key to learning a lot, and don't hear this as much as I used to, I just said yes to everything. So if there was an opportunity to become part of another group or to work with another group, always say yes. Because there are endless numbers of creative, smart, um, persistent people. And that's a great environment to be in, well past 40, 50, even 60 years old, to keep learning. And I've never wanted to stop learning about things. I'm endlessly fascinated by all things science and technology. So if you're that kind of person and you're immersed in that environment, you can just soak up things all day. And now with this new opportunity that I've had in the last 2 years, it just starts all over again. And so it's just like being a kid again, with a whole new set of things to learn and a whole new set of people to interact with.
What a fantastic opportunity that must have been. And I think if you were to pull the sound bite of advice out, just say yes is a pretty good piece of advice. And I know, you know, engineers were notoriously pigeonholed as shy and in our own mind and self with problems. But if we can branch out and say yes, in the STEAM space, I think understanding those opportunities, expanding your willingness to engage, lets you know what you enjoy, what you might enjoy, and what needs more investigation than the things that maybe you don't. But if you don't try it, how do you know? And so I think that's just brilliant. Um, Moving into your time at Scripps, and I want to talk about this if we can take just a couple minutes.
Sure.
You spent a lot of time volunteering with, I'm guessing, youth,
Yes.
coaching them in the triathlon. What motivated you to give back?
Um, really, I mean, this is where, even though my parents weren't scientists or engineers, I grew up in the church. We were always volunteering, in some fashion. Um, I think both my parents, there was a blurred line between what was, sort of the professional giving back and the personal giving back. And so it was always part of the culture was, you're not here to get, you're really here to give. And everything that you can do to put yourself in a position to give prepares you for that day when you're going to give back and help other people who are not necessarily less fortunate, but just don't have the knowledge you have or don't have the access to things that you have. And so I was always an athlete after a fashion, casual. I was a swimmer in high school because that was the team that was available to me, and that was the thing I did athletically the best. My brother ran track. Um, but when it came time to do triathlon, I found I had an advantage because I could swim, and I could swim fairly well. And if you're a great runner but a poor swimmer and you get out of the water exhausted, I have the advantage. I can run faster than you because I'm not tired. That was an opportunity to actually work with some people who did exercise physiology and science, and having an engineering background, a practical engineering background, gives you a leg up. So when people start talking about ATP and converting carbohydrates to energy, what do you do with fat stores and how does human endurance work, you're like, yeah, and tell me more. Yes, and tell me more. And so you keep applying that as a lab of one on yourself. And then there were opportunities to get formally trained to do coaching. And I never wanted, there was never a professional desire to do it. But the other thing to do was to help charities raise money. And usually the thing that they can do is provide these programs where they take people from, say, the couch to the, finish line of a marathon. And it's much more doable than people think. If you're persistent and don't break some of the, more, or don't do the more egregious things in training, you can have a very successful amateur career as a Ironman or a marathoner. Human beings are among, if not the best endurance athletes genetically in the world, and realizing that potential, especially for a person who hasn't engaged in athletics, is incredibly gratifying. I will say that, that gratification comes in two forms in my life. Something we already talked about earlier, which is problem solving. I think you know that too, that there is almost nothing that compares to being able to solve a problem. And the other thing is completing something that seems impossible to other people. And if you can be a mentor to people to help them solve problems, or be a coach to people who want to successfully complete some athletic event that they didn't even think was possible for the best athletes in the world, um, that's some joy they're going to take with them for a while. So to be some small part of that, I don't know, how do you resist?
It sounds tremendously rewarding, and you did it for a number of years. Do you still give back?
I do. I help organize. There's an organization here called the Challenged Athletes Foundation. The primary goal is to raise money to give to help people raise funds for prosthetics for athletics. The prosthetics, should you lose a limb or you become paralyzed or wheelchair, there are things that are covered by healthcare, most people's healthcare, but sports prosthetics are not. and they're very pricey, tens of thousands of dollars. Some of them have AI built into them now so that they can mimic actual limbs, and raising money for the athletes who maybe go off to after military service and come back with some sort of disability, a missing limb, sight, loss of function, but also kids who were born that way, who may be born without a limb. One of the really fun things is every year, and it's coming up next month, is that we raise enough money that we can surprise them with a limb. Now, kids grow, so they're going to need to get new prosthetics the whole time they're growing up. And one of the things we do is we've raised millions of dollars and can gift them on the day, invite them to the event, a triathlon here in town, and they get it. And you see kids who've never run on their own run. They're given a prosthetic, and within a few minutes of adjustment, they run. And so there's a little kids event every year where the kids who get new prosthetics race each other, and they do it, and you would never know that they didn't know how before. I don't know. I think that anybody confronted with that as an opportunity would jump at the chance to say, how can I be part of that? And I'm blessed with the opportunity every year to be able to be part of that. So I help them run the run course. I used to be their triathlon coach for a while for their volunteer team. I just stay involved in any way that I can.
Absolutely wonderful, and so glad you're able to give back that way. Um, I think moving through all of that it's kind of hard to follow that wonderfulness up, Steve, in some ways, but um, you kind of worked through scripts, and at some point you made a decision to change positions and move over to the University of California. And well, take us a little bit through that process, and you know, what was the driving force behind it? Was it the new opportunities? Was it to work with new people, new challenges, new problems to solve?
Yeah, I think a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was already being drawn to do things that were outside of my normal job description, which sort of put me in contact with the larger world. So I started being on these international, as a non-professional scientist, but as an engineer, being the data and engineering person on a lot of science committees globally, put me in touch with people that were doing other interesting things. And it became apparent that that was a new direction. And, I had a bunch of conversations with my past management about growth opportunities, and it seemed like when this opportunity came along, it was tailor made for that moment. And I think that one of the other, I'm slow to realize things. My family would tell you that I like staying where I am, but sometimes life has a different idea, and it kind of hits you over the head with a new opportunity hard enough that you go, oh, okay, maybe this is where I should go. And it's always scary. I think that I'm a little bit jealous of people who jump at the chance to do new things and change their lives, and it's natural to them. For me, it's always kind of a scary proposition to reach an inflection point in your life and then take the new opportunity. But I have to credit my new bosses with being insistent, and they said, "Hey, you can really make some big contributions here. We've looked at what you've done, and we think you have a lot to offer." And that was pretty attractive to me. And so making the jump without having to really change organizations, because it's still part of the University of California. So, little things like healthcare and seniority and years of service are maintained. But then there's this whole new suite of opportunities that come up, and a bunch of people that have expertise that you don't have. They're now your colleagues, and you can learn from them and exchange ideas. I may be probably the most odd person they've ever hired, because I came out of a research lab and a data repository. And now I'm working with these people who have expertise in library science and information. But it's a good marriage, because as we go into the 21st century, those things are less separate and more intertwined in terms of it, philosophically, but practically as well. Every scientist at every university and even within private industry at some point is going to have the outputs of their research available to the next generation. We've done that informally for very long. What we do at California Digital Library is we make that more formal, almost as formal as publishing your experiment and putting it on the shelf of a physical library. We've done that for centuries and we know how to do that well. Doing that now in the digital age is still something we're working through. We have some best practices, and so I can help people. I can talk to the people who work in labs because I've done it. And it's an opportunity to say, hey, have you tried this? This might make it easier for everybody, because you're not going to be here forever. And at some point, you're going to pass this on. And we have a way of passing on that information. Many times we don't know who we're going to pass it on to. So we have a lot of medical scientists, and doctors and even attorneys who are interested in climate science for a variety of things that I couldn't describe to you right now. So I have to make sure that that information is available to people from all kind of walks of life, up to and including the general public.
Very, very cool. And as somebody who's used digital libraries off and on for back in modem days 25 years ago, I applaud the effort, and I know that it's not easy. So thank you for that. And I hope some of the other agencies that I work with kind of begin to adopt some of this forward-thinking activity as well. Um, we're kind of coming up to our 30 minutes here, Steve. A couple questions,
Sure.
and I think we're driving this at young people, and so you already gave one sterling piece of advice, but if you were to give some advice to a young person, high school, college, what might it be as they seek out their career?
One thing is, and I think that this comes more naturally to some people than others, is that you can learn just about anything. Um, I can learn how to play piano. It doesn't mean I'm going to be concert level, but man, it comes in handy if you have a piano in your house and you just want to produce some music. So almost every field that you feel like you want to explore, you can reach some level of really um, mastery that's going to be good for you. And I see so many people sort of self select out of things because they're like, I'm not good at math or I'm not good at science. And it doesn't help to say that. It may not come as naturally to you, but you can learn it. And more than that, you don't have to learn all of it. You learn the parts that are relevant to you, and that's going to come in handy. In addition to expanding on say yes, is learn everything that you can. Learn philosophy, learn rhetoric, learn statistics, learn all that you can. And if you are open to a lot of opportunities, you're going to find it's in some way at some point using all of that knowledge. For people who are wired a certain way, being able to access all of that knowledge and put it to good use, there is no feeling like that in the world. Um, Being able to access that and be useful and access that knowledge to move the world forward. And I think that that's on all of us to try to do that. And the last thing is, do things that move the world forward just as a purpose. It doesn't mean that it has to be overtly charitable. There are a lot of private industries that help move the world forward with research and exploration. Um, but don't settle for a career path, especially in STEM, where it looks like you're going to be pigeonholed. Put yourself in contact with lots of people, and I would give myself, my younger self, this last piece of advice: stay open to new opportunities to change and evolve. Um, that is how we're wired. That's why we're here. We're Change is constant. You hear that all the time, but it's real. And if you can embrace change, it's a lot better than resisting change, especially when it moves things forward. So those things, learn anything, say yes as much as you can, be open to things, be charitable as much as humanly possible, and always look for the next adventure.
very, very thoughtful. I really appreciate all of those items. And I'll close with this really tough question. What do you love about your job, Steve?
The people. I work with some of the most creative, smart, um, and charitable people. I could have if I had to design it, I couldn't do any better.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Steve. This has been extremely enjoyable. I knew it would be based on our conversation earlier. And
Same.
I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's really fun to talk about these things and explore these ideas.
And this has been a presentation of the ARI Podcasting Network. Again, thank Steve Diggs for taking time out of his busy schedule. And thanks to Ryan Kessler for producing this podcast.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to listen to new episodes of Stream of Consciousness, available on your preferred podcast listening station.